All aboard! Welcome to the All Aboard podcast. I am your host, Brandon DeFreitas. I have a special guest here with a vengeance, here for his long-awaited rebuttal. John Iannello, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Brando. How are you doing? Happy to be
I'm
on.
doing I'm doing pretty good. I gotta admit, I'm sweating a little bit, and it's not just the heat. It's not just the heat. I'm in the basement, John. I'm anticipating what's coming because all I know is, after we went golfing, you told me I'm quote, actually no, it was here at the draft. You said, quote, I am going to join the pod and I am going to use your arguments against you.
I got notes, Brando. I
He's got
re-listened
notes.
today. I came
So,
back with notes. This isn't going to be you and Kyrie Irving. Like, I'm not going to agree with everything you say here, but this is going to be
oh,
last pod. There was a lot of agreeing going on. This is going to be contentious for sure.
I did not appreciate that John B wore a Kyrie Irving jersey. Like Celtics are not like it's just not the time to wear that shit.
No, no. I mean, especially when he performs like he did in game one. I mean, is that going to be John B this season, performing like Kyrie in the finals?
Oh,
I mean,
I think Jimmy hopes it is, right?
you too. I mean, I did trade your first round pick, so I need you to win this year. That'll make that trade a little. I'm sure we'll get into that trade. That'll make
We
that trade a little bit better.
I'm sure we will. Well, before we get into it, I always, try to butter up the guest a little bit, make sure I don't get ripped too hard.
All
But
right, fair.
first and foremost, you've been a fantastic addition to the league. Definitely brought a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, and trades to the league. So we appreciate that. It's taken this league to a new level. I mean, we love Travers. We absolutely love Travers. But being active and being aware of things that happen in the NFL, like DJ Moore being on the Bears now, it's just not his thing. So it's been a big addition having you come in and helping him out.
Appreciate that. Yeah, trying to stir things up and make an impact early, good or bad. I think I've been able to do that so far. We'll see.
At what point is the full usurping coming where it just officially becomes your team?
That's Travers' choice. I'm happy to be the co-manager. Sometimes he declines trades that I like, so But again, he said he's putting up the money. It's on him. So at
Yeah,
the end of the day, we're a team.
I've noticed because he's rejected two trades that we've agreed on. Well, luckily, the
Yes.
second went through. I was a little nervous after the
Yes.
first one,
Yeah. Yeah. I had to
but
sidebar with him quick and be like, "This is a good one, Travers. We're okay."
so let me ask you this: where do you want to start? I know we just had the draft. We could always pull up the draft board, or we could talk about some of the trades. I know because that's where you got really roasted in the last pod. So where do you want to begin? You tell me.
You're the host. I got notes for both. I'm ready for talk big picture draft, details of draft. I got notes on the trades that I've made and league wide trades. So whatever you want to do, it's your shit. Let's steer it.
All right, all right. Give me a second here to pull up the draft.
Sounds good.
I'll tell you, the desktop app is absolutely horrible for Sleeper.
So much worse than the phone. I was just looking at that.
And it's like I can't share my screen on my phone or something like I guess I could do
Right.
this on the iPad, but oh, big league announcement. That reminds me. We are not breaking after 40 minutes because well, I was going to say John B paid for it, but he really didn't. We we sprung again for the Zoom Pro account. It's our second pod in what, a week and a half, so if we can keep this up and do it more frequently, I think it's worth it. I paid the annual to save $1.50 a month, so we're in this for 12 months, John. We're in this
Fiscally
for 12 months.
responsible. That's smart.
Yep.
Save that
And
money.
I'm sure we're gonna piss some people off and they're gonna want their own rebuttal pod, so we may as well get into that.
Yeah, you may have to
But
have each member as a guest one time just to say their piece.
that's what we do. That's the health of the pod. You thought I was trashing you. I was really just making sure I had a co-host for an
Just
upcoming podcast.
just setting me up to get on to beg to
Uh,
be on.
Yep. So you should see my screen now. You see the
Yep.
draft board?
Yep, I got it up.
All right, excellent. So here's where it all ended up. We'll probably talk through. I mean, it is kind of tough to see the board because I'm sitting here, but obviously I didn't make a single pick. Um,
You're the only
but
person actually.
I I was I the only person without a pick?
hmm Nine people
Wow.
picked.
Yep.
One did not.
Wow.
Our commish did not. You
I
traded away your pick.
it's funny. I had a bunch of picks the first year because I was bad. I made a bunch of trades. I had three. I think at one point I had four first round picks. No, I had three first round picks at one point. Second year I traded in to get Zach Charbonnet in the second round. And
Huge.
then this year I was like, I got to be fiscally responsible and just kind of sit this one out. I
Yep.
personally, once Blake Corum went off the board for me, or even Jermaine Burton early in the third round, then I was pretty much done. I wasn't interested in trading into the third at that point.
No, it got pretty thin pretty quick, and some of that middle second I also didn't like. So I was happy to move some picks away when I got some offers that I liked. So
Yeah.
yeah, it got thin quick.
All right. Well, obviously the conversation here starts with Caleb Williams, which naturally brings us to the Patrick Mahomes trade. I
Hmm.
gotta admit, John, I don't remember a ton of the Patrick Mahomes trade, but what I remember from it is it was Patrick Mahomes, and then you got back the 101,
Yep.
Daniel Jones,
Yep. And the 106
oh,
and
and
a
the 106. Okay.
third. So the
Okay.
one I don't know which third it was, but one of my thirds. So 308 maybe.
So let's say it's Patrick
Yeah, 308
Mahomes for Daniel Jones, Caleb Williams, Drake May,
and Marshawn Lloyd.
and Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah.
How do you feel after it?
I actually didn't love the way the beginning of this draft fell for me. I
Yeah.
still would do the trade. Like I think it opened up possibilities of like dodging Canelo's taking Marvin Harrison at one. So it was
Hmm.
sort of like you said, I think in your last pod, right? There's a top six tier.
Yeah.
I
I
also
felt that
thought
way.
then within that top tier, there was a second top tier, which was the top two. Like to me, Caleb stood above the other two quarterbacks and Marvin Harrison stood
Hmm.
above the other two receivers.
Yeah.
So doing that, now I've taken Patrick Mahomes and turned him into a hopefully stud quarterback and a stud receiver to guarantee that. And then I was hoping it would give me flexibility at 5-6 to go. This was pre-draft, right? Pre-NFL draft. So one of the other receivers, Brock Bowers,
Yeah.
and like sort of give that flexibility. And then post NFL draft, like you said, Bowers slips in
Hmm.
rookie drafts. And unfortunately, it went receiver, receiver, and kind of left me in a spot to either take Drake May or reach for Brian Thomas, reach for a guy outside that top tier.
Yeah.
So I didn't love the way that that sort of fell, but again, if three aren't going to hit, right? That never's happened in the NFL.
Presumably, but
You'd
you
think,
can't say that for sure.
right, right. If I mean, if three hit, then this is a home run. If
Yeah.
two hit, I have two, right? Like it sort of guarantees that you're hoping two of the top three picks hit for longevity and have long NFL careers and fantasy careers. And now I've sort of guaranteed I have my two starting quarterbacks for hopefully 15 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort
Now
of,
it's
I know you
interesting.
don't, go ahead. Sorry.
You said that you got Mahomes, you traded Mahomes, and that secured elite quarterback, elite receiver, but you were
Right.
getting one of those at 102 anyway. So
Right.
that's
One
not
of
so much
them.
for Mahomes. Yeah.
Right. No, it's not both for Mahomes, but it's sort of when your roster is thin and you have one sort of guy who stands above the rest. I tried to, especially in our league with four flex spots, like
Yeah.
I need more. Right. And
Hmm.
um, so this sort of was like, all right, like, I know you don't believe in this theory, but I know there's the theory out there of take the getting older elite quarterback, flip him for the younger version of it plus. So
Hmm.
in my mind, I took Mahomes, flipped him for Caleb plus. But
Yeah.
if you did it a couple years ago, Mahomes for Jalen Hurts plus, you'd be thrilled now, right? So that's sort of the way I viewed the Mahomes trade of like I need more than one quarterback. This gets me still a quarterback plus.
Yeah. I could definitely understand. It's just so tough because Mahomes is like, he's the best player in the NFL. And I know he
Right.
had a down fantasy year last year, but the year before he was like quarterback one, quarterback two. You figure they're gonna get weapons at some point and load them up. So
Maybe they do have a weapon already. We'll talk about that later on in the draft. They might
maybe
already
they
have a great
do.
weapon.
Yeah, maybe they do. So like I don't feel like he's always gonna be what he was like. I think that's his floor. But I do see what you're saying. Trade him for the younger version. End of the day, this is gonna come down to what Caleb Williams ends up being.
Correct.
Like
Right.
if
It's
Caleb Williams busts, you look like a clown.
unless Drake
If
May becomes a stud.
okay, you you
I have two
spread your
shots at
risk.
it now, right? Like
You have two shots. I look. I don't even want to say it because it's not a hot take. Like it's just so tough. Like I know Caleb Williams is such a great prospect, but I you know I just how's he going to be Mahomes?
true,
I just don't see it.
true.
That's my issue with it. Like what are the chances he's going to be the elite guy? Like those guys come around once every 20 years or something, generally.
True. Although I would say that like if we the league starts right now, Mahomes is not the first quarterback off the board. So for
He-
for NFL, yes, but for fantasy,
who would be for
I would
dynasty though?
for
Because
dynasty, I
I
would say Josh Allen would be number one, just because of it, and maybe even Hurts could go above him. I think most places probably have Mahomes three. So it's like, again, he's still three. Like it's still
yeah,
one of the first picks, and Caleb Williams, you hope becomes that, but that's why you have to get the plus. Um, and I
and
mean,
you definitely got the plus. You definitely got the
right. I
plus.
mean, we finished third to last year with Mahomes. So he's not helping. He wasn't helping us get to the playoffs last year. So
Hmm.
at some point, you got to make a bold move. I think when you're sitting at the bottom. Um, so let's see if it turns it around. I mean, got to go bold.
I will say there's no way I trade Mahomes at this point for Jalen Hurts. I almost don't care what the plus is.
I think I
Like
would. I think I wouldn't trade Jalen Hurts for Mahomes, to be honest.
I think the Eagles regret paying Jalen Hurts. That was horrendous last year. He couldn't pass the ball. Like he looks like a slightly more functional Justin Fields. Justin Fields without taking the sacks.
Hey, we love Justin Fields on this pod. Um,
I know he's
yeah,
a
I
great
mean,
fantasy quarterback, and look, he can get his tush pushed into the end zone with the best of them. But I think part of dynasty too is you look at quarterback and or any position, and you have to be good for real life NFL to keep your job. Um,
I mean, it's true, but yeah, I mean, they've already paid him though, so it's like he's going to be their starting quarterback for 3 years, 5 years. I mean,
yeah,
crazier things have happened. Like I don't know, Mahomes gets hurt and he could be injury
true.
retired in 5 years. He gets
Maybe
hurt.
I'm the highest guy on Mahomes, John. I just look at it.
You
I
do
see
love him.
another decade. I see
Yeah,
another decade.
yeah, and maybe he does, but even a lot of those like Kelsey's like his big upside, like you mentioned in the last pod, where he doesn't run, so he needs the touchdown upside. Well, if Travis Kelsey's got 1, 2, maybe 3 years left, like where's the touchdown upside coming from? He has to replace one of the best tight ends ever, a huge touchdown machine. I'm going to bet against him being able to do that forever.
All right.
Might as well reset the clock. And
Yeah.
in 5 years, when I trade Caleb Williams for the next guy, reset the clock again.
There's no way you're gonna be so stubborn on the Caleb Williams take, especially if he hits. There's no
I
way
mean,
you're
if
gonna
he
let him
hits,
go.
I will be insufferable more than I already am. So
Oh please, oh please. But we probably spent enough time on Mahomes. We spent a ton of time debating it on the board. Caleb Harrison go 1-2. What do you
yeah,
think of the next two picks? And I know the way it fell didn't really help you. I thought it was interesting. Tam seemed pretty locked into Malik Neighbors, but he did
yeah.
dangle it out and trade a little bit briefly.
He dangled everything out in trade briefly. To be honest, I mean, we
It
had a
was a
couple of
little bit
roadblocks there.
he was a little bit of a tease.
Yes, he was. I don't think he moved a single pick, but flirted with all of them. I I was sort of with you in the last spot. I did have Odunze rated higher than Neighbors. I think that's personal bias for me. I loved Odunze. Like I have a t-shirt with
Yeah.
him, like loved him in college. I think Neighbors is going to be a stud. And I think, I get the sentiment around the Giants. Um, and despite him being my quarterback, Daniel Jones, but I trust Dayball to figure out some passing attack. I mean, Daniel Jones, like we are shitting on the Giants for last year. Daniel Jones barely played. 2 years ago when he plays, they made the playoffs. Like, and he looked
Hmm.
pretty decent. So I feel like we're just kind of discounting that where, I mean, I think Malik Neighbors is going to be a stud. So I had no problem with the way that went. I thought that order of picks was completely fine. Um, I also agreed with, Tam didn't really need a quarterback and Mark playing the game.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think him playing the game made total sense. I think that the tier break between Odunze and Thomas is bigger than May and McCarthy.
I do wonder, does Mark go this route without the message board chirping about it all spring?
I think he does, only because I was trying to move up into that fourth spot, and he was like, "No, I think, yeah, I think it was the right call for him. I think he's, my conversations with him. I don't know if he was fully even listening to the message boards until a couple weeks before the draft. So I think once
That
he got
sounds like
locked into
him.
the wide receiver. Yeah, focus on the Red
Did
Sox.
did you ever get close for 103 or 104?
I don't think so. I mean the talk I had with Mark was the me taking the 4 and 7 and him taking the 5 6 and us sort of splitting it with that
Yeah.
order that we have right there. But I would have wanted something on top of it because I felt the tier break at 6, and he was arguing that the 4 7 is actually more valuable. So we kind of were like, neither one of us is going to want to throw in something extra. So we sort
Yeah,
of let
interesting.
it die there.
I kind of I kind of feel like the so he doesn't get the receiver in that case, but like I said, I was pretty heavy on the top six being a tier, so
Right.
I feel like it's pretty close between the two. If you really pushed me, I probably would prefer 5 6 straight up, personally.
Right. That sort of was my argument. And for me, it was I probably don't take Odunze at 4, but then I don't have to like split my tier at the next one,
Yeah.
and I can take Thomas at 7 and get something later. So that was sort of was like I might take Thomas over May at 6 anyway. I might as well get something
Okay.
for it later and do Daniels Thomas was sort of my plan for that. And
Yeah.
him be able to do Odunze May, but he didn't want to give up. Like I was looking at, his late second or early third, and he didn't want to do that. So kind of fell short there.
Yeah. Interesting idea though. I remember you guys brought that up and I was like, "Oh, that's intriguing. I wonder if it's going to go through." So,
Yeah. No, we discussed it, but like most of this draft, a lot of trades were discussed and nothing, not as much
Tam
came
definitely
through.
catching some strays. I will say
Not just
the
him. I had
pick,
other trade talks too that fell through.
yeah. What 103 with the Tam when he said the pick was up for trade. And then I think he told you that he wanted to get an elite receiver. So we were like, okay, so it would have to be Mark at 104. And then we
Right.
looked over at Mark at the table, and Mark was like, I'm not really interested in moving. And we're like, okay, so there's nothing here.
Right. Right. Or you'd have to give some stud current receiver, which nobody was going to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
But
agreed.
yeah, I think the top six, none of those picks I can really poke holes in. Like even the Malik Neighbors, like you said, like I think that's just personal preference. If you like
Yeah.
Neighbors over at Dunze, hats off to you. And if you like the other direction, I think hats off the same way.
Yeah, I think so. I personally also, like to favor the SEC and Big Ten guys that stand
Mhm.
out for receiver. I mean, if you just look at like the cornerbacks that were drafted this year, like, okay, there's like two outliers with the Toledo guy and a Clemson guy. The rest are like Alabama, Iowa, Bama, Georgia, Rutgers, Michigan, Missouri. Like those are all SEC and Big Ten guys. So if I'm going to tie break anything, it's going to be those conferences. So right there, I'm
That's
going to tell you
fair.
Neighbors over Dunze, like just for that purposes alone.
Yeah, competition is a big, big part of it for sure.
Right. And the offenses they run tend to be more NFL style versus, the Big 12 and the Pac 10 or whatever they technically are or were. I don't know what numbers they are now. Pac 12 doesn't even exist. Run these spread offenses, one reads, like, it's harder to translate on those. So again, tiebreaker SEC. Again, I think Odunze is going to be a stud, but
Mhm.
that's the tiebreaker for me with that.
What do you think of McCarthy at 7? I felt like he sort of had to do that once he drafted a Dunze.
I think so too. I think that was the must pick there. I hated McCarthy coming out of college. I
Hmm.
thought he was like he'd have to fall in the perfect situation because he was so protected in college.
He
He
kind
fell
of
into
did.
he fell into a great situation. So like originally I had him probably ranked mid second pre NFL draft and was like now I don't know what to do with him. So
Yeah.
I think that was the right pick for Mark there. He needed the quarterback and he fell into a great spot. So
Presumably a good quarterback coach there and Kevin O'Connell, plus, I mean, the best receiver on the planet. I
right,
think Jordan Addison's a flawed player personally, but what he does well, he does really well, and he can beat one-on-one coverage with Jefferson on the other side. So he's facing
right,
a lot of light coverage. And then TJ Hawkinson's going to be back at some point. So that's a pretty good 1, 2, 3 for any quarterback.
totally, totally.
Brian
And
Thomas Jr. went 108. I think, talking to Tam before the draft, it sounded like he was pretty locked into Neighbors and Thomas, which is
mhm.
probably why, as there were discussions going around, it felt like it didn't really go anywhere because I think he really wanted those two guys. but I do know there were some talks at 108 too. But Tam, from what he was telling me, like, because I think it was you were trying to trade up, right? And I think John Canellis was also trying to move up. Um,
Yeah.
Tam wanted to draft Brian Thomas. So he
Yeah.
was like, I don't think he's going to be at 10. If you trade up to 8, is Brian Thomas the selection?
And I should have lied and said no, but I was an honorable man and said yes.
Oh,
Don't
the
want to create
honor.
enemies too soon.
Ned Stark
So
over here.
he said, who would you take? And I said, I won't lie. And I said Thomas, and he said that's who I would take. So I don't think we can do the deal. So
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah,
I
I was
know
disappointed.
not really privy information as well, but Jimmy, who was initially at 109, wanted Brian Thomas as well. So
Yeah, and
everyone
he
at
was
that point in the
next.
draft was hoping Brian Thomas. And when I owned 110, John, I was hoping Brian Thomas somehow.
Yeah, no, I mean he was. I think most people had him next on the board. I think he's going to be pretty good too. Maybe it's my LSU bias, but um, I think he's going to be a good player.
We'll pick
So
on that on the message board a few times. So
it's already happened, and I'm sure it'll happen more.
I've arrived at the ninth pick. I know we're going in order here. I feel like I'm dodging bullets. You haven't come at me yet, but maybe you're just waiting, you know?
Well, most of these notes are on the trade, so my bullets for
We
you. I mean, you weren't involved in this draft, so how could I throw bullets at you?
well, maybe it could be for not being involved. We can before the end of the podcast, we can take a look at my rookie class. I do have a rookie class.
That's
It's
fair enough.
not the most inspiring, but
I
it was
mean,
picked up on the waiver wire.
the waiver wires in this league are bananas. Like the amount of fab spent on guys who are
Trey Sermon.
it's crazy. Crazy. I've never seen anything like it. Just certifiably insane humans in this league,
Yeah.
you know. But that's what makes this league so great. You need
Well,
a little bit of wildness.
let's do this, John. Let's wrap up the first round. And then I want
Okay.
you to touch on a couple of points from rounds 2 on that you thought were interesting and you want to talk about. And then I do want to get to your notes. Let's talk about the trades after that.
Perfect.
You did so much prep. I don't want to keep it away from that. And I'm dodging too much heat over here for the
I think
host
so
right now.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so first touching on the end of the draft. Interesting move by Canelos, I think,
Yeah.
jumping from 201 to I don't know what he gave up to get to. I think he gave up multiple seconds to get up to Bowers.
I think it
Um,
was we could look it up, but without looking it up, I know the big piece was basically what ended up being Blake Corum
so I think he gave yeah the 201,
and the two
maybe
in the 209.
209. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was all. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting move. I was curious of who he was going after. I'm kind of shocked at the pick, to be honest. Like,
Okay.
um, he had, I mean, I know he's aging, but he had George Kittle. So it's like he was, he has a top five tight end at the position. Maybe he's back end of five, but like uh, he also has Patrick Mahomes now, right? So sitting there is Xavier Worthy on the board. It seemed to me like that was the what he was going to do, and then he quickly took Brock Bowers. So that kind of shocked me that that was the play there. He also has Cole Kmet, who I know he's high on with the Bears offense. I did try to make a move for him earlier in the offseason. And he's like, oh, I want a piece of that offense. So it's like you have George Kittle, you have Cole Kmet, trade in a bunch of assets to jump up to get Bowers. I thought was an interesting move. Um, I don't hate it if he believes in Bowers, but
I liked Bowers a lot. I felt like he was a potentially elite player available at this point in the draft where the landing spot is bad, but the
right.
talent is pretty unquestioned. Um, so
Agreed.
Bowers would have been my ninth player. I did like the move on his part. I was
Yeah,
curious, and what I wanted to ask you is he was at 201.
right.
So I don't even know if I want to ask this, and have John listen back to it. Or if you even want to answer, you can defer if you
Um,
want. Would Bowers have been the selection at 110? Say he doesn't go Xavier Worthy. Say he picks Ricky Pearsall or Lad McConkey
at
at 109.
109,
Or
that
sorry, that before trading, that would have been Jimmy. So say Jimmy picked Pearsall at 109.
I
And you had Bowers, Worthy, and McConkey. Well, so Bowers or Worthy on the board. Where were you going?
man, that would have been hard. I don't know if I would have taken him to be honest. He's I have him ranked as my 10th player on the board, but I have Worthy ranked at 8. So I think I probably go Worthy because I didn't get a wide receiver at 5'6". I think
Hmm.
that sort of dictated like I should take a receiver here. I would have also considered a running back, but I think I would have stuck with my board and gone. Said I need a receiver. We have four flex spots. Like, I know I agree with you. Something you said on the last pod about the difference makers at tight end are the elite ones,
Hmm.
and that's like the only ones that matter. But like if Bowers doesn't become one of the elite ones and he's just one of the middle guys, like, well, Ferguson can cover that for me too. Like, with
Yeah.
the tight ends we were trotting out last year, like Ferguson's a huge step up from Noah Fant was our number one
Uh,
tight end last year. So like,
yeah.
no, the position's not covered for us, but like it's probably the last position we need to cover with how many flex spots we have. So I think we had too many holes at receiver. I'd probably go Worthy, and if Bowers doesn't go 9, he probably falls to him at 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at least I did hear some hesitation, so we're not sure. And you can see from John's perspective, he's
Right.
probably sitting there and saying, "I'm not sure," looking at your team and being like, they could potentially use Brock Bowers. So
Right, with the unknown jump in makes sense. Like I said, I don't hate it. I was just shocked. Like I was like, oh
yeah.
crap, he just went up for Bowers. Wow,
Hmm.
that was
Xavier
random.
Worthy at 10. I know, not my favorite prospect. He's not a bad player. I,
It's
I
not
think
my
he's just
favorite
not a
prospect either, to
yeah,
be
not a
honest.
great separator. I don't love the size, but speed with Patrick Mahomes, you can't ask for a better landing spot.
Yeah, exactly. And they've taken swings at receiver and missed for a while. And when Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes move up for a receiver who's the fastest receiver in combine history, like that alone is going to be, you talk about draft capital. Like he was a first round pick. He was, I mean, what he was like the fifth receiver off the board, and they moved up to get him with the Bills, so they probably paid a premium to move up with the Bills. I mean, like that's it. Kind of was like, all right, like I would have preferred Thomas, but he was clearly my next receiver on the board.
Hmm.
So it was kind of like all right, auto pick. This is what I have to do at this spot, and I needed a receiver. So
Why him over Pearsall and McConkey?
uh, Pearsall I had not very high. I don't get the
Okay.
Pearsall love.
Oh,
I was shocked when the Niners made that pick. Like that's I don't know. He has shades of like this is who's the guy the Eagles took right in front of
Jalen Rager.
he has like Jalen Rager feels to me where I'm just like where did he come from? All of a sudden like right before the NFL draft there's all this buzz around this guy Ricky Pearsall. And I was like
Yeah.
so I don't get the Pearsall thing for the NFL or fantasy. Um so my next after Worthy would have been Ladd or Keon Coleman actually. Ladd, I just don't see the upside. He just doesn't seem like a one to me. He seems like he'll be a solid two.
Hmm.
And then Keon is like he's like JJ McCarthy. I had him moved so far down my board, and then the Bills take
Yeah.
him at the 202. And I'm like, well, now I got to move him up my board and figure out what to do with him. So Worthy going in was like, all right, if he's a first round pick and goes to a good spot, this would be great. And he did. So it was kind of like, all right, he has a chance to be a one more so than the rest of the guys, I think.
That's fair. And I know, I think the big thing with Pearsall, like for me as someone who was interested, was
Mhm.
probably the fact like Matt Harmon loved his separation. And I'm a Harmon stan. I'm just if you ever want to know how I feel about a receiver prospect, just get a reception perception
Right.
membership. And I'm bound to just regurgitate what's on the
Fair.
website, John.
That's fair. And like, two, I mean, right, he's Worthy has a chance to be the Chiefs' number one wide receiver. Pearsall, even if let's say the 49ers move Debo, well, Pearsall's still their number two. Like, that's his upside right now,
Yeah.
is his team's wide receiver, too. Maybe Ladd can be Keenan Allen, maybe, but like, that's a long shot. And then, Worthy just has a chance to be his team's wide receiver one. So to me, that was like kind of like all right, this seems like the guy to take here.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Alex landing Lad at 202, kind of the end. I had that as the end of the tier before Keon Coleman, so I like that selection for him. And Alex is a team that needed a little bit of depth too. So a guy like Lad McConkey, he's going to walk off the bus and get 120 targets in that offense. There's no one else
Yeah,
there. Spare me
100%.
the
And
Josh Palmer. He blows.
no, and Ladd will
So,
catch 100 of those 120. Like he'll be, his floor is probably Deontay Johnson, which is a pretty
mhm.
good floor, right?
Oh,
If he
that's a
doesn't get
Brandon
clutch stuff.
player.
I had him in my other league. But his ceiling is Keenan Allen, I think. So it's sort of right. I like that pick. I think it's a pretty safe guy to have. He went exactly where I had him ranked on my big board. I did have Coleman in that tier just because of landing spot and his ability to be a big touchdown guy, but who knows with that offense.
So give me a couple takes on the rest of the draft here.
So I actually went through and based off my draft board gave like value to A, all the picks,
Oh,
and B, all the teams. So that's how I knew you didn't have a pick because I was like, oh, I only have nine names here. So I'll give first my three positive picks. I think will be like the biggest point value of like where I had them rank compared to where they win, and then I can give you my three negatives too if you want.
okay. Yeah, and
So
if you wanted to give out your grades too, you could do
I
that.
could
It's
do
up to
that.
you.
Yeah, I'll do
So,
that too. So my biggest positive pick, funny enough, came with the 410 with Bucky Irving
okay.
for Justin
Justin.
McAllister.
Yep.
So I mean I had Bucky Irving ranked as my player 28 and he went 40 off the board. So that gave me 12 spots of value. That
Okay.
I was shocked that he kept sliding. There is one running back who I had slide completely out of the draft when Will Shipley. So whoever picked him up in waivers, I loved that pickup, but I had him ranked below her. So Bucky Irvin was my number one point value. He slid. The other one was actually my own pick. I was thrilled when Marshawn Lloyd fell to the 3-8. I had him I have Marshawn Lloyd as my 20th ranked player, so slid 8 spots in my rankings.
That is really late on Marshawn Lloyd.
I had him as my RB 3 on the board. I had him after Trey Benson going at picked. I had him above Blake Corum, above Jalen Wright. So when he fell, I almost took him at the 3-2 and was like, oh, I'll go with a receiver. And then 3-8 comes around and he's still there. So I was thrilled with that. Um, and
I
then
had him I had
but
him right there with Blake Corum.
yeah, I mean
Right
that
right
they were
there.
my 3-4.
Mhm.
And he was my tiebreaker with Fat Thor, Josh Jacobs keeps struggling like he did last year. I think that Packer offense. I know the Rams too, but I didn't like Corum as a prospect. So it's those two are sort of splitting hairs. But again, he went almost a whole round later.
I need
Um,
more of this Corum negativity as the
uh,
Kyron owner. Keep it
yeah,
coming. Keep it coming.
yeah. I mean, I'm not big on Corum. And then my third, I thought best pick was Malachi Corley by the
Oh,
Freddy's
Alex.
Enterprise. Yeah.
Yeah.
He slid 7 spots for me um, in my rankings. I had him up at 23 and he fell to the 310 or yeah, 310. So, he fell 7 spots in my rankings compared to where he went in the draft. So those were like my three, these guys are sliding and ended up getting good value. Um, my three worst, the worst pick I saw with value wise, I was sitting at a bar watching a soccer game and literally went, "What the fuck?" when Spencer Rattler was taken at the 4-1. I don't know what you
Oh,
think about that pick, but that was shocking to me. I had him
I
as my 43rd player on the board, so I had him going undrafted completely.
UDFA. Okay.
Yeah, and my quarterback 8, and when he went beginning of the fourth, I was stunned.
Wait, quarterback 8. So
Yeah,
who
well, there's what 5 win. And then I had
is it
um
6 with Penix?
or
I think it's
six
6 with
six with
Penix.
Penix, and then I have Jordan Travis as my quarterback 7. I had him going in the
Okay.
fourth. Just Aaron Rodgers is super old, like and coming off an injury, so he's
Still
more likely
available.
to.
Still available for wait, there could be waivers on Monday.
I had him ranked in my top 40, so I had him
Okay.
going in the draft, but Rattler surprised me big time. I also just don't think he was a very good player. Like I mean, I know he left, transferred like everybody does, but he kind of was like, get the fuck out. Teams were telling him to like leave. He had a pretty rocky college, you know, time at college, and maybe some of that was from his high school days, but I don't see it with Rattler. I think he'll be dropped pretty quickly.
Ooh.
So that was my worst pick.
Okay.
Second, I thought was Kimani Vidal. I know there's some love around him at the 4-2. I also didn't have him getting drafted. I think he was like my player 47. So I thought he jumped up pretty high there. I know the Chargers sort of have that opening. They're signing a bunch of guys, but I just I don't know, drafting where do you go in the NFL draft? He went
He was in the sixth
605
round. Yeah.
out of Troy. Like uh, has there ever been a 6th round running back that's ever worked in the NFL? Like maybe one or two.
I thought you were
I
gonna say,
just
has
think
there ever been a player out of Troy? I was gonna draw a
also
blank.
also true. Like I feel like, in the 4th round you're taking shots on guys, and some of these shots I was confused by, to be honest. I think the rest of the fourth was like, oh yeah, these picks make sense. Like, you're taking shots on running backs behind some injured guys that were significantly higher drafted than Kamani Vidal, Spencer Rattler. I got that one. I don't get. I get the Jatavion Sanders. And then you'll love this one. My third worst pick and biggest reach was Michael Penix, who
Whoa.
I had
That's
ranked
like my
at
best value.
player 26, and he went 17. So I had him moving up 9 spots. He was taken ahead of.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
I had him graded as a first round player, not a top 10 player, but a first round worthy selection.
I don't see it as a prospect, and I don't see it when he's guaranteed to sit 2 years at least, maybe four if Cousins plays his whole contract.
I would love that as the Cousins owner, but I just don't see it happening.
I
Maybe
mean,
with another team.
I also the prospect like issues that I have is like, again, I love Washington. I was betting on them the whole way and won a lot of bets with them, but some of the hate on Jaden Daniels was who he's throwing to, right? He's throwing to two NFL studs. Well, Michael Penix was throwing to three NFL wide receivers,
Yeah.
including Roma Dunze, against the Pac-12. He faced one good team defensively, which was Oregon, and yeah, he carved him up. But he's also 24. Like, there's coworkers we have who are significantly younger than him. Like, how he
Yeah.
was still in college at 24, I don't know. Like,
He's
double
six
ACL
years
surge. Go ahead.
6 years younger than Brandon Whedon, if you remember that.
Yeah, that worked out. Like, he'll be Brandon Whedon's age by the time he starts. Like, double knee surgery, shoulder surgery. Like,
Yeah.
I I don't see it as a prospect. Like, I was shocked I had bet that he would go in the second round of the NFL draft, and he went pick 8. Like, I feel like if the fantasy pick you're taking, everybody laughed at the NFL draft, that's a problem. Like, he was universally laughed at that pick. Like, I think one person maybe had their back, and it was Dan Orlovsky. Event after like a day was like, "Oh, this is why this makes sense for the Falcons." It doesn't make sense for the Falcons.
Ah,
I don't think it makes sense for fantasy either. I mean, that one was another one.
that's fair. If there's two things, I said this exact same thing on the last pod. If there's two things I just regurgitate and just like move to the side for, it's Matt Harmon and it's draft capital. So that's what ultimately did it for me. I I just think he's gonna play at some point as the eighth overall pick, or they completely screwed up, which I guess is a possibility. But yeah,
Trey
I don't
Lance,
know.
Trey Lance.
He's on my team. The draft capital, John. The draft capital.
Yeah, I mean, I get the draft capital, but the draft capital when you have to wait multiple years alone, like, go look at Jordan Love's fantasy journey. Like, it helps that we have the taxi squad. But if he doesn't start after year two, what does Tam do? Like, he probably has to drop him. So, yeah, it's late second. It's taking a shot, but I'd rather take a shot on, you know, first and second round wide receivers that early second round wide receivers that are still on the board at that spot than a guy who's guaranteed to not play for 2 years.
It won't surprise you that I owned Jordan Love at one point in this league, and I was forced to essentially give him away to John B because I had to get. This is when Dak got hurt at the beginning of the previous year before you joined, and I needed a backup. So I traded John for Mitchell Trubisky, and I believe Jordan Love was in that deal. So
Yikes.
horrendous value, but the quarterback limit necessitated it, and I was trying to
That's
win.
why we shouldn't have a quarterback limit, or at least that's why we raised it this year, right?
I think six is perfectly fine. It's funny. Like I have four, and I've been like planning my roster. I don't want to give away anything, but I'm like, am I really going to drop someone to add like some of the crap that's on waivers?
I
I'm
have
sorry.
6
Look,
and
I'm
it's
not
so
saying anything
overwhelming.
about DL. I'm not even going to say his name. Not saying anything about DL. I know you love him, but the guys on waivers aren't exactly like awe-inspiring at the quarterback position right now.
Yeah, and I mean, and I have 6, and it's quite overwhelming to look at my quarterback room. Be like, why do I have so many quarterbacks?
Yeah.
But like none of them. I
Well,
mean, I guess Stidham will be droppable, but or probably will be droppable, but right now none of them really are. Otherwise, I would drop Stidham.
You're probably safe dropping Jared Stidham.
Probably, but if he becomes a starter, there's
True.
teams that need starting quarterbacks. So if he's starting for the
Yep.
Broncos, like once the six quarterback limit for other people open up, it's a piece to trade for a couple.
Then you'd get Trey Lance from me, and then Trey Lance starts and becomes a
It's,
stud, and
it's
I've
definitely what
just
I want.
repeated the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this is a
Exactly.
good point to switch over to the trades.
Sure.
I know we didn't get the draft grades, but you have them. You did the work. Post them on the message board. Would love to see them.
Can
Um,
do.
Let me unshare my screen just because I don't trust anything that anyone says in this league chat. So while I navigate to the transactions tab, let's just make sure. Well, yeah, Ben posting a picture of our wives is the first thing that came up. So
It doesn't need
yeah,
to be
this
on
is
YouTube.
this is this is why we navigated without the
Yes.
the screen share.
Yes.
Let's see.
Definitely.
I wish you could. Oh no, here we go. We can filter by trades.
Oh, cool. Didn't even know you can do that.
So I will share my screen again. The only thing you can see on the message board here is someone saying kissing Jimmy's ass. Could have been me. I don't think it was. Might have been John B.
Probably John B.
Um, Probably. All right, sharing
Just
again.
blame Kyrie Irving.
So how far back we have to go back before the draft?
Oh yeah, I made a bunch of trades before the draft. I feel like it's funny. My first trade I made in this league just seems to be skipped over and talked about for value.
What was the first trade? Oh, the Joe Mixon,
Joe
right?
Mixon for James. Yeah, it was last year. It was in November. It was right at the trade deadline where I
Yeah.
traded Joe Mixon away for James Cook, a second and a third, which even at the
It
time was
worked out.
insane value, I thought.
Also, Joe Mixon got extremely lucky to land with the Texans, and then they somehow re-signed his ass. I don't understand that.
Crazy. Yeah. I mean, I think if I did Mixon for James Cook alone or a second and a third alone, fair trade. I did both.
Yeah.
So that one I was thrilled with. Yeah.
I think I was offering you a second for the longest time.
I think that
And
was maybe I was like, I might get a late second. That's like the best I can do. And
yeah.
then in comes DJ Diet Z offering me James Cook a second and a third. And I was like, yeah, I'm running with this. I hate
Yeah,
that it
that
says
that one
team
that one
three. I want
definitely
to see
worked
what pick
though.
it was. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know what pick it was exactly. I guess all I had was the 208. So that ended up becoming George Kittle. So it was
Okay.
basically Joe Mixon for James Cook, George Kittle, and a third next year.
Nice value.
I will take that.
Yeah, nice value for sure.
Yeah.
We've already beat up the Mahomes trade, but we can see here it was Mahomes, Daniel Jones. You got a third this year. And then
308.
yeah, it was the exact trade we lined up.
Yeah.
Marshawn Lloyd. Um, so Daniel Jones, Marshawn Lloyd, and the two quarterbacks, May and
Caleb.
Caleb. Yeah.
Yep.
So we can probably skip over that one.
Perfect. Because
Interesting,
all my notes
just
are on the
kind of
next
while
one.
we're here, George Kittle was traded to John earlier this offseason.
Wow.
Fryermuth in a second for George Kittle.
And then he traded him just for a second.
But it
Like he
was
just
a year
basically,
difference.
yeah. Uh, yeah, he traded him
That's
for
in
this year's second. So he
2025.
just he just sort of gave away Pat Fryermuth for free.
I don't really have a problem with doing that.
No, I jumped at the thing, even though I know Kittle's old and you know, but I'm like the 208 at this point. Like I know you talked about Adonai Mitchell a bit on the last pod. I feel like people are like forgetting. I feel like all the hate's been on him, been like him as a prospect. I feel like everybody's not thinking about the fact that like is Anthony Richardson, like I know he's a good fantasy quarterback. Is he really going to support two wide receivers? I don't see a world that he does that.
Hmm.
Like if
It's
everyone's
gonna be
high on
tough.
Pittman, I don't. He wasn't great quarterback passing wise in college. I think he's going to run a lot, but are they really going to? Is he going to throw enough to support both receivers?
I like Josh Downs too.
Right, and they have Josh Downs, and they like throw into their tight ends and Jonathan Taylor. Like I just don't, I just don't think he's going to support the two receivers enough
Yeah.
to justify it.
So I want to focus mainly on your trades. Jahan
Okay,
Dotson deal. I don't know what John B's only bad deal of the offseason. Don't know what
That
he's
was
doing
this
there.
offseason? Holy crap.
Yeah. And keep in mind, Mark was an early pick. So Mark was like the 204,
Yeah.
and he's going to be an early pick next year. Let's just be honest.
Ouch. He
The
said it, not me,
Justin
Mark.
Fields, Justin Fields and a third. You got a third. You got a third. Some credit there. I didn't.
I, I
I've left that out conveniently.
I've read the messages and I was trying to push for him to do a second and a third, but once he held firm on the first, I made him throw in a third back to me.
Okay.
So
So Bryce Young and a first. Obviously now you probably just don't feel great. My first. This was the Zach Charbonnet from the year before, by the way, in case you're curious.
perfect. Yeah, I was
Um,
hoping you would be a late pick at least. So if it's the 110, I would have felt better. 109.
I just I've said my piece, so I want you to say your piece. I I did not expect Justin Fields to not land a starting job. I totally agree.
Right.
I just felt like where your team was at in your development, even now, I thought you had a good draft. I actually think you're probably like the sixth strongest team this season, which is great for a young team. I just like I didn't think this was your year to go for it. So like I would prefer to have a Bryce Young straight up than a Justin Fields.
So I think where we disagree then is Bryce Young. Because you
Hmm.
said this in the last pod of like, it's a team going for the future, you're trading the younger quarterback. I think Bryce Young is terrible. I was basically like,
Whoa.
the second I joined Will's team, I messaged him and said, I'm going to do whatever I can to get rid of Bryce Young. I don't care what I'm getting back.
I wish I
Like,
got in.
anybody could have got in. I was so happy to move him. And again, like you said, like, I mean, I have lots of stats with Bryce Young versus Zach Wilson as a rookie. They have the exact same numbers, like yards per game, touchdown to interception, like pretty much exactly the same with Zach Wilson and Bryce Young. You're a slave to draft capital. Zach Wilson was the number 2 overall pick. Bryce Young was the number 1 overall pick. Like,
Guess who owns Zach Wilson?
probably you.
Bingo.
But probably right now, hopefully nobody because he's terrible.
No,
Like,
Edwin just picked them up. We don't
Edwin, go
do we
trade
throw strays? Do we throw
Derrick
strays?
Henry for Bryce Young. Who says no? Um,
It's interesting.
right? He needs quarterbacks. It's interesting. We should waive the 4 quarterback rule just for that trade to go through
Yeah,
because it's interesting.
if that
Um,
trade was offered, I would waive the 4 quarterback rule just to see that happen.
exactly. So to me, like, and Bryce Young, like, what they did to make their team better too was add Deontay Johnson, who's fine, drafted Xavier Legette, who's like the weirdest prospect in history. If you look at his college tape, like, I'm uninspired by everything that the Panthers did with Bryce Young. Again, he's Zach Wilson. I didn't like him coming out of college, and at the time, like you said, like, you didn't expect him not to get a starting job. I found on Fantasy Pros their rankings for dynasty startups last year. So this was January of 2023. So it was before last season. So I'm sure that the lines moved a little bit, but on average, they have Justin Fields. So there's 3 guys who write for their site. They have Justin Fields ranked quarterback 11, quarterback 12, and quarterback 9 for Dynasty going into last season. So again, this was
Yeah.
this past season.
Oh, he was hyped.
Bryce Young, who again, 101 overall pick, hadn't looked as bad as he did last year yet. They have him ranked quarterback 16, quarterback 18, and quarterback 25. This was before his rookie year. So they're already down on him going in. Then his rookie season, have you looked at gone through his stats at all? Because I did this before I made the trade.
I
His
haven't.
He somehow got worse as the season went on, which is impossible to think about. Like, I should open this up on my phone because the stupid website doesn't show me like quarterback rankings. Well, let me pull up where he was ranking wise. So last year, Bryce Young had his best finish the entire season. He finished twice at QB 9, highest finish of the entire season. He did it in
That's
week
not bad. That's
5,
better than I thought it was gonna
and then he
be.
did it in week 16. He has 9. He has 2 9s. Then he has 2 17s, 1 19. After that, his highest finish was QB 22. So he's consistently outside the top 20.
I
My
mean,
favorite
he had 2 games with multiple touchdowns.
two. My favorite week of his. So who what John I traded into John, right? John B.
Yeah,
So John B wants to win the title this year, right?
he does.
Let's say a quarterback injury happens and he has to start Bryce Young. Do you know where Bryce Young finished as the quarterback last year in week 17, championship week? 33. He finished
Ouch.
outside the top 32. There's only 32 teams. Tyler Huntley came in and played 7% of snaps and outscored him. He played 100% of snaps.
That
He
was
threw for
against
100
Jacksonville.
against Jacksonville and threw a good quarterback matchup. He threw for 112 yards and a pick. He finished as QB 33 in championship week. That's impossible. I don't he played 100% of snaps and finished as QB 33. I've never seen that before in my entire life. Like that's at the end of his rookie year when he's supposed to be showing signs of improvement. He was literally worse than the Ravens backup quarterback. Um,
That's tough to
Meanwhile,
stomach.
tough to stomach. Meanwhile, Justin Fields, who again, now he struggles for real life. He had finishes of QB 1, 3, 3, 3, 4, and 8 last year. So we had what 6, 7 games finishing above Bryce Young's best ever week.
Oh, I
Like
mean, there's no
to me,
debate over who's a better fantasy quarterback when they're playing.
right,
There's no debate.
right. So if I'm going into it saying I don't think I'm taking a risk because he could end up in a bad spot, but I don't. And you said already, you don't think there's a world that Fields doesn't get a starting job. Then there's no debate that Fields is by far the better asset to own. And even if I don't like his long term, he starts exploding. He's now a trade target. I don't think Bryce Young can explode.
Mm,
Bryce Young won't have weeks inside the top 5 at quarterback. Fields had what he had one, two, three. He had 5 last year in a bad year. So you know, to me, it was like, oh yeah, like I'm getting, now it hurts throwing in the first round pick. I would have preferred to do, a second in Bryce for him.
yeah.
It was a little bit, I was like, all right, I'm probably overpaying a little bit because there's the
Well,
unknown.
let's hope it's the 110.
Let's hope it's the 110. I'm rooting for you. But when he starts, he's, you know, I would be willing to bet that it's hard now because I don't know if he's ever going to start, but I would have easily bet you that Fields would have scored more fantasy points the rest of his career than Bryce Young. Like Fantasy Pros, by the way, for 2024, only has Justin Fields 7 spots behind Bryce Young right now. And he's not a starting
Interesting.
quarterback in the NFL. Like, even then, they do have Penix at 28. So Penix is a little bit less valuable than Justin Fields for them. They like Justin Fields
Oof.
more than Michael Penix. So that should tell you where their values stand. But that the fact that they're even that close now when Bryce Young has guaranteed 3 more years at least under contract and Fields may be a backup, like to me, the value were, I traded at the time for a top 10, top 15 dynasty quarterback and traded away a bottom 10 starting quarterback in the NFL. I get the age, I get the draft value, but I mean, you got to show something. And two weeks with double digit touchdowns when he doesn't run, that's puke. That's yeah,
So
it's bad.
I try to be a fair and honest man, and I will admit I didn't I didn't conceptualize how bad it was.
Yeah,
I knew it was
honestly,
bad.
honestly, until I started getting like railroad, I knew it was bad too. But until I started getting like blown up on the message board, I was like, all right, I need to get some numbers. And I was like, okay, it's basically Zach Wilson and holy crap, quarterback 33 in championship week, like
My
100% of snaps.
my only issue with the Zach Wilson, I know you're just comparing for stats, but Bryce Young was a very like accurate quarterback in college. He was a different passer than and he played within the rhythm of the offense. Good anticipation in college versus Zach Wilson. Like if you go back and watch his BYU tape, you're like, I don't know how the NFL missed this. Like he kind of just looks like
Oh
Zach
yeah,
fucking Wilson, you
I was
know?
so out on him in college, coming out of college too. My brother compared him to Patrick Mahomes, and my brother's not allowed to make quarterback comparisons ever again. But everything you also just said about an Alabama quarterback, smart in college, accurate, anticipating, playing within the
Mac
offense,
Jones.
Mac Jones. And Mac
Yeah.
Jones looked really good as a rookie while Bryce Young looked terrible. In both situations, the team didn't put anything around him. He got no help. Mac Jones is now a backup quarterback in Jacksonville. I would guess in 2 years, after year 3, Bryce Young is a backup quarterback somewhere. I think he probably gets the next 2 years. But like you said, I'm not competing in the next 2 years, so I'm not going to hold on to A bad quarterback.
I'm gonna do the laziest thing ever and look back at Tua's rookie year.
Do it.
I know they get compared a lot, both Alabama quarterbacks,
Both a
little
little
smaller guys.
undersized. Yeah.
Um, they don't have game logs for 20. Oh, because he was he a rookie in 2020? Yeah, he was, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the rookie year. You can get rid of the top of it.
Yeah, so he didn't play a lot of it because of
But
Ryan
even these
Fitzmagic.
numbers from a fantasy perspective, like I remember when he played early on in his career, there were questions of whether or not he was like actually good.
Right. Right, but he does have, a week with 35, 21, 15, 21, 17. Like
This is significantly better than
it's significantly better.
Bryce
And then
Young.
he added um Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, right?
Yeah,
So
even year two is pretty decent
right,
when he
that I
played.
think that was then Waddle, and then the next year
Yep.
was Tyreek Hill. So unless Bryce Young can add Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I'm out on Bryce Young. Like that's sort of how I view, like was completely out and was willing to part. And by the way, if 2 years ago you traded Tua for Justin Fields straight up, people would be laughing at you if you were the one giving up Fields for Tua. Like
Mhm.
you'd be laughed at. Fields is a better fantasy player by a lot,
Yeah.
but he now is, relegated to a backup where I thought Raiders, like so many teams needed a starting quarterback. Like I don't know, I think he's a better NFL quarterback than Gardner Minshew.
I do agree with that. I think the NFL went too far the other way. Like I
Right.
absolutely agree that like look at this point he didn't show enough improvement with Chicago. It's tough to make him your franchise guy. But like Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, like
Right. And
give me a break. Or
the
Sam
Vikings, Sam
Darnold,
Darnold. Right. He's
like
better than
it's
all
time
of
to
those
give up on
guys.
Sam Darnold. Yeah,
Right. Agreed.
I'm totally with you.
Agreed. Even the Patriots, like I would have much rather traded a fifth round, sixth rounder for Fields and had him as a bridge than Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah,
If we still wanted to, like, he's better than Jacoby Brissett. And I mean, I think there's a world that the Steelers have him as their quarterback for a couple years because they're never bad enough to draft high enough to take one of these guys. So they have to sort of do this. And if Russ doesn't have it or is aging out and they like Fields at practice, like they could turn him into something.
yeah, I definitely think Russ is just about washed, to be honest. So
Right. So, if he's starting for the Steelers, like I'm all in on that.
so John, I'm gonna do something a little bit shameless here.
Do it. Be
We
shameless.
we
You get a
talk about
caller.
draft capital. You said, you like to see a little something worth holding on to. If I bring up one Trey Lance onto the board and we look
What's a little something I'll hold on to? Because this is the
20
littlest of something.
year one, 24 points against Seattle. We don't really see that for Bryce Young. We
Right.
have some rushing stats there too. 14 points against Arizona. Not the best, but a
Mm,
floor for a super flex. 23 against Houston.
I
I
mean,
would show 2020. I just want you to remember, I'll be fair, I'll show 2022. He gets injured in the Seattle game. And
yeah,
then that Chicago game was that rainy game. Justin Fields was crap too, I believe. So
probably.
we just haven't seen the guy. That's my whole point. Number one, we haven't seen the guy, but has he shown you a little something more than Bryce Young has, John?
No, because you say we haven't seen the guy. Nobody's seen the guy since what, 2018? Like he didn't
It's
play in
crazy.
college either. Like he hasn't played a football game since like high school. Like his season got canceled for COVID. So like at least Bryce Young showed it in college. I also had Trey Lance similar to Zach Wilson, where I was like, it's a guy running around throwing the ball against nobody. Like what are we even talking about? Like
That's fair. And it very, very well could be the case. And look, San Francisco moved on. They see him every day in practice. You could argue that. But you do have to keep in mind too that when you're not the starter, you don't get very many reps in season. So
right.
he's had the preseasons. He he wasn't the starter to start 2021. He had that wrist injury. Year two, he has that serious injury, and then it's last year in training camp. Brock Purdy just had the job, and they trade him. So
So
I
so
don't know.
you're
The
you're
only
you're
thing the only
you're
thing I'm arguing, John, is that
you're
there's not enough bad tape out there to say this guy's good or bad.
your
He's a
argument for
mystery.
your argument for keeping him is basically he was injured a whole lot. Like that's the guy you want on your roster. And again, I said this at the time. I don't hate the speculative ad in the offseason. You added him in a playoff run where you're going for a title. That's crazy. Like
I,
if
I I already had back. I had Josh Dobbs and Gardner Minshew back there.
was Josh Dobbs even starting at that point? Hasn't he been benched by the playoff run?
I think he was benched. So was Gardner Minshew.
I was like, you were one injury away from needing a quarterback, and there were quarterbacks on the waiver wire who are going to
Cooper
be starting, and
Rush.
you picked up
Cooper Rush.
Trey Lance.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he again, like if you added him in January and there wasn't a quarterback limit, like the Stidham that poll was Stidham versus. I mean, Stidham legitimately could start week 1 for the Broncos. Like that's a real scenario. He started games for them last year. There is no scenario, but outside of Dak Prescott's leg exploding,
That would
that
not be good.
and even then, I don't know that they're starting Trey Lance. Like that's not a guarantee. He's
Here's
not
what I will
listed as their
say.
number 2.
Jerry Jones has been very stubborn, and I don't know if how much you followed the Dak Prescott contract. He has a clause in his contract they can't franchise him. If
Really?
Dak Prescott wants to get to free agency, he gets to free agency. They can't franchise him next
Interesting.
offseason.
I don't love that
Trey
as the
Lance is
CeeDee Lamb
also a
owner.
free agent. Trey Lance is also a free agent, but I'm painting a picture, John. They're like, we're not gonna be able to re-sign Dak. We give Trey Lance like the Jordan Love 1 year prove it deal. And all of a sudden I'm sitting here with a rushing quarterback who has shown a little something, and he's the
I mean,
2025 week one
yeah,
starter.
if that's how you want to use roster spots when you're going for a title, be my guest. But uh, honestly, I mean, trade me a first for Justin Fields. He's better than all of that.
I'm getting Trey Lance for free. I just gave up some fab. I
That's
didn't get to
true, I
give up a
guess.
first.
That's true. But I mean, if you want to spin zone that like that, that's your business. But
Look,
that's
we can
holding
go
on
into
for dear life.
the Trey Lance Twilight Zone anytime you want, John.
I listen. Drew Lock's a better quarterback. You want to
Also
pull up?
available.
You want to
So
pull up some stats? Pull up some
this
Drew Lock
entire
stats.
Jared Stidham trade is just to clear a roster spot for Drew Lock week one.
Correct. You get it now. Well, I
Announced
mean,
to
I have
me.
Daniel Jones, so I guarantee a starting quarterback.
That's
He
true.
gets hurt or gets benched.
I will admit, you might not know this. I am actually a Daniel Jones apologist.
Are you?
I actually think he's been better than people think. He's had an awful offensive line and no
Yes.
supporting cast his entire career. I don't think he's great, but he's absolutely one of the top 25 quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's better than
So,
Bryce Young.
and he runs a little bit
He
better
runs a
than Bryce
lot.
Young.
He
I
runs a
just
lot,
got that.
actually. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, he's had his last he had one season he played 16 games. He ran for 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's a
yeah,
lot of running.
I had him. I thought
Yeah.
last year he was being hyped as a top 12 guy for fantasy.
And I got him and Caleb Williams and Drake May for Patrick Mahomes.
The problem is I think if you're the Daniel Jones owner, you got
He's
to
got
hope
one
he
year.
lands somewhere else next year because I think the
Yeah.
Giants are done with him.
He either has to lead them to like winning that division
Yeah.
or yeah. That was another one, contradicting myself with the Michael Penix thing. Like Daniel Jones was laughed at as when he was drafted in the NFL draft. Those aren't guys you want on your team. Yeah.
Exhibit A.
Although I don't know, Tingus Pingus looked pretty good yesterday.
He did. He did.
Oh yeah.
I I I don't want to jinx anything, but the Seas are looking very, very good. So
Season 4. I'm actually not even
yeah.
technically a Celtics fan, but I do root for them. I'm a
I
Spurs
just
fan.
don't like the sport. I just don't.
Fair.
This is going on YouTube. I'm gonna live it down. I just really don't like the sport. So
It's fair. Just football and baseball.
football and football, just two different kinds. And speaking of which, who do we have on the wall back there? Is that I'm guessing it's
Fede,
Real Madrid.
it's Fede Valverde. Yeah, I had to leave the draft early to watch us win a 15th Champions League title.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
right before we signed Mbappe. So
It's real tough being a Real Madrid fan. I knew what
you
I was coming on with, and I did wear my Arsenal
I
jersey.
almost I almost put on a Fede jersey. I have his jersey. I almost put it on. But
Purchased at the Emirates Stadium.
I
Not
I
this
have a
season, the season
I have
before.
an
So
Arsenal sign. I was there. I went to London and we toured the stadium. Not a lot of trophies. I
They
like it.
get you because the euro's worth more than the dollar. So then I'm like, oh my God, a jersey for like $80, but like it
It's a
really isn't a
hundred.
deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like 100. Like, yeah.
I'm not doing the translation rate in my head, but
No.
it's essentially the same thing, I believe. But I thought I was getting a great deal. Any other trades or rebuttals? We're probably getting towards the end of our time here, so I want to make sure I give you every chance you've gotten. I've gotten once again, I have charmed my way off scot-free on the podcast. You've gotten a chance to say things, but
Well,
I've
I think you've
certainly
mostly
saved my
agreed
own
with
bacon.
me. I think you've agreed with me. I think I swayed you is why you've gotten off scot-free. Is I think I've sort of turned the tides of how bad he actually was. And yeah, like you said, looking back, like he doesn't have a starting job. That's a terrible trade. But at the time, how was I supposed to know that?
Yeah.
Um, let me see. Let me just go through my notes quick.
Yeah.
See what I did want to defend Canellis a little bit actually, but
Oh, you know what? He needs it. I feel like I go after him a little bit too hard on these podcasts, so let's
well the
defend Canales.
well the defense is sort of goes against though what you believe is like you like the idea of the Mahomes Lamar stack, him running that's what you said in the last pod of
I
like you
did.
didn't
I
you
did.
didn't want
Yep.
him, but then also like talking about the draft and him rebuilding, like he's not competing now. So then flip like he's not winning with Mahomes and Lamar, right? Like he's not winning a title with that. So then being able to flip Lamar for, Jordan Love, a young piece and a good offense with plus, I guess I don't know what the full trade was. Um, like I
Could
don't know,
definitely bring that up. Let me see
full
here.
trade. He's 20. He got, yeah, I don't love what he got in the trade, to be fair. He got Aaron Jones and Jerry Judy in a second. So I don't love,
2026 second. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't love a 2 years down the road second or Judy or Aaron Jones, to be honest. But like, I don't know, Jordan
Bigsby
Love.
and Bigsby a third and two fourths also going to John B.
Yeah, I think
That's
he could have
like a
done
pile of
that.
hot garbage.
Right. But you also could have just probably done not included that. Like, I think he could have done Lamar for that rest of the turnaround. But I mean, Jordan Love was just quarterback five. Lamar was quarterback four, and Lamar is older. Like they're right now like the same quarterback. You got younger in a pretty great offense in the backers with a great coaching staff that's young. Like, I mean, is Harbaugh? How long is Harbaugh going to be the Ravens coach? Is he going to retire soon? Like, I had no problem with that
Okay.
trade from him, especially because he's rebuilding, like you said. Like he needs more than a quarterback. Like, yeah, that's a formidable 1-2 stack that's going to have you competing every week, but like, yeah, he'll beat the other rebuilding teams. It's all puts him above. That's not title contention, right?
And if I'm not wrong, he then dealt Aaron Jones. He dealt Aaron Jones in the third for Michael Wilson in the second.
That's a weird trade, but I mean, I get move up around by switching that. I mean, yeah, I mean, right, that's proof he's not competing, right? And when his wide receiver two is right now, I guess he hasn't put his draft picks in, but his Deontay Johnson, like you need a lot of stuff besides two
Mhm.
quarterbacks. So I like the idea of, you flipped your quarterback who just won the MVP for a younger quarterback who was the same level, a running back, a wide receiver, and a second round pick. Like I think that's how you rebuild. And when you haven't had to do the rebuilding thing yet. That's what you're gonna have to do.
So I have had to do the rebuilding thing. It was just before you joined the league, and because I had an awful startup draft. So
Fair. Right. So, in 2 years when a bunch of your guys age out, except if they do, I guess you have a lot of young receivers. I was like, you might have to flip Dak for pieces or,
yeah,
you know, the
fair.
where's Justin's team? In like
Oh, please
you,
paint a picture of him going downhill. Please do that.
he's got a lot of young pieces too.
Oh, fuck.
But I don't know, McCaffrey and Barkley age out. Like he might have to move Hurts for a couple first, like retool the whole roster. Like, that's when you need more than one spot,
Yeah.
one quarterback's not saving you. Mahomes could have just rotted on our roster for 10 years or Lamar on his, but that's how you got to quick if you want to do it relatively quickly within a couple of years. Otherwise, you're Tam, unfortunately.
Oh,
You're
I
just
think
sitting there
Tam's.
making
It looks like
picks.
Tam's next up for the pod. He's the one who's gotten roasted more than talking about the
Yeah, but
tease
how
trades.
long of a pod is that going to be? Thank God you got the extra time. He's gonna be sitting there with all the possible trades he never made. Sorry,
He's
Tam.
getting bodied.
I had to show the shots just
Yeah.
because multiple times back and forth.
Did we
Anything
cover
else
the
you wanted to
notebook?
bring up
Did
on
we-
our team, our trades?
I don't think so. I'm looking at your team now, and I really like what you got. I mean, Caleb Williams, I think he's going to be a top 12 quarterback this year for fantasy. He's in a perfect spot.
Yeah, it's
Um,
couldn't be asked for a better stop spot for a rookie.
Gibbs and Walker is very solid. The longevity on Walker we can debate. I know I'm the Charbonnet owner. I still
I mean,
do. I think Walker is still the starter even with a new coaching staff. But
I think it will be for a couple of years. I mean, I know the running back longevity. I have not gonna be a surprise to anybody. I've shopped him a little bit for
yeah,
that exact reason of the people competing this year and next year. If that's not my team.
but Gibbs is downright a stud.
Yep.
Marvin Harrison's a stud. He's going to be
Yep.
good. DJ Moore, I mean, he's going to perform.
Stack too.
Metcalf, Cook, Kittle, Worthy, Ferguson, Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels, like, say what you want about him. I think we've sort of learned about like Jaden Daniels at a minimum is Justin Fields, who was a great fantasy quarterback for a few years,
Right. Right. And if he becomes
So
Lamar, it's a home run. And I
yeah.
think they're very similar players.
So I think you are the number 6 team, last team in the playoffs, potentially as it stands right now, with a team
Dang.
on the upswing. So I like what you did. And you know what? At the end of the day, even if we could pick apart trade one, trade two, you missed a trade there. I missed plenty of trades in my rebuild that you're not aware that happened, my
Yeah.
initial rebuild.
Yes.
It's
Shout out
about where you
Isaiah
end up.
Pacheco.
It's about where you end up. Let's not talk about Isaiah Pacheco in a first for Brandon Cooks. That doesn't need to be. That
Yeah,
one
fair.
stings a little bit now.
Fair. Yeah, and
But I
I
do like
think
where you ended up. So
appreciate that. Yeah, I was looking today and it's June, so it doesn't really matter, but the start percentage, the lowest guy in our starting is Jaden Daniels at 52%. Last year we were starting Xavier Gibson at 1% start percentage. Like the fact that even now, our bench is Roman Wilson, which I loved as a pick, Rashid Shaheed,
who
Marshawn
was a
Lloyd,
starter
Javon
for you
Baker.
last year?
Right. These guys are now and got a better situation this year with guys leaving. Like that's now our bench. Like definitely have quickly, Curtis Samuel for Buffalo is a 30% guy. Like he's now, has a chance to have a role in Buffalo. So
Yeah.
it's definitely been a quick flip, which I'm very happy about the fact that, Xavier Gibson's not in our starting lineup this year because he was a bunch last year.
Yeah, I think you're gonna be a dangerous team to play, and I think playoffs are very possible for you
And
this
I will say,
season.
if you look at most rookies, not um, not Bryce Young, but most rookies get better as the year goes
Yeah.
on. So we sneak into the playoffs, and Marvin Harrison and Caleb and Daniels and Xavier Worthy are finding their own.
Yeah.
Watch out. Josh Jacobs
Yeah.
goes down, and Marshawn Lloyd's the starting running back.
Could be.
There's
That's the best part about the NFL season, man. Like it breaks differently every time. So
totally.
it's like you never know. You could get the Puka Nakua or something like that, and all of a sudden, huge
That's actually
difference.
one thing I wanted to rebuttal your last pod as well. You and John talking about the fourth round and the undrafted guys that everybody's looking for the Puka. Yes, Puka had the best rookie season ever, but every year there is a Puka. There's last year,
Not a
even if
Puka, not a
okay,
record
okay,
breaking
well,
Puka, but I know what you're
there's never
saying.
been a Puka in the NFL before, even first round picks. But every year there is a top 25, top 30 wide receiver, running back, tight end that doesn't go in the top 3 rounds. Like I went and looked back at the drafts here. Even last year, remove Puka, Tank Dell didn't get drafted. The year before that, there was Trey McBride. Um,
Went in the third.
no, he didn't go drafted. He didn't get drafted in your guys.
Jimmy picked him in the third.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, yeah, sadly.
Okay, well, third, yeah, and
Yeah.
every year like there's late third. You guys are talking about like the third and the fourth being, oh, these are all UDFA's. I don't even have draft grades on these guys. I mean, um, even yeah,
It's
Khalil
fair. It's just
Shakir is like not great, but
the
he
hit
was
percentage is very low. I wouldn't count
no,
Khalil Shakir, but
it's low for sure, but my oh, and Romeo Dobbs didn't go drafted. And I mean that like again, it's low. You're trying to find a needle in a haystack. But to say that like, everybody's chasing Puka, well, it's like, well, the year before you're chasing Romeo Dobbs, and the year before you're chasing, the Trey McBride in the third round, the Sam Laporta in the third round, whoever these guys are. There's always a guy, my dynasty, my other league started a year before you guys did, so we had the extra rookie draft. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a mid third round pick.
Yeah.
I mean, he's wide receiver 4 in dynasty right now. Like,
I was gonna say Stephon Diggs was a fifth round pick in the NFL, so was Amon Ra. Like I
right,
totally get that. It's more
right.
of a for me, it's a
So
percentage thing.
totally, I'm not hunting third
Yeah.
and fourths, but right,
Some
I don't
people
think.
are.
Yeah, I mean, you want to take the shot and throw the needle in the haystack, but I wouldn't. I think it's swung almost too far that everyone's like, well, everyone's looking for the Puka. It's like, well, no, everybody's looking for the guy who's gonna, because there will be one that goes in the fourth or doesn't get drafted that will break out and will
Yeah,
become a dynasty player that people want.
true.
So that's what I think people are hunting after, not just Puka, like, the extreme example. So even remove him, Tank Dell.
Yeah,
Tank Dell didn't get drafted last year in your guys' rookie draft.
yeah.
So hunt,
Fair.
hunt
Well,
Tank, the Tank Dell.
it's a good thing we added the fourth round, I think, because there were definitely guys who didn't go.
Javon
I picked
Baker.
up I picked Pacheco off the waivers like the
You
first
did.
year or
Isaiah
whatever.
Pacheco. Yeah.
Isaiah Likely, I know I'm a huge
Isaiah
stan,
likely didn't get drafted.
so
This year's fourth round pick, Javon Baker, my 402. When he becomes the
yep,
Pat's number one and him and Drake May, I'll have Drake May and him and DJ Moore and Caleb as my stacks terrorizing this league for years.
yep.
I don't know if Javon Baker will be anything. I mean, he played for UCF. Like,
And I'll be trading away Dak Prescott for someone, and you can trash me on the next pod. So,
perfect. Yeah. Unless it's to me, then I'll be back and getting your back.
well, I appreciate it, John. Thanks for joining the podcast. It
Thanks
was
for
great
having me on.
having you.
I am sad nobody called in. I didn't get
I
any
know. No,
rebuttal
yeah,
calls,
everyone.
but
Yeah, Jimmy was all about it, but Jimmy's more
who's
bark
Jimmy?
than bite.
You mean Justin?
Justin, yes, Justin. Justin is more bark than
I
bite. So,
feel like a lot of people in this league are big barkers, and including me, I'm not a big biter. So that's what makes this league
yeah,
great. Is you don't want people biting.
no, no, no. It's
Just
we're gonna trash each other to each
ruthlessly.
other's faces on the board constantly, but it's all in good fun, and
Yes, it
then we have the
is.
podcast where you can come on. Does look like Will Tam is next because I think he's roasting a little bit after this one, but
Yeah,
I think
fair.
he had one of the value picks too. I can't remember which one, or
He
not
had
the
the
value,
lowest
but the
value. Michael Penix.
yeah, there you go. So
Yeah,
he
you
got
two can talk about Michael Penix and how he's going to be. Well, I mean, have we ever seen anybody in his shoes do something like what you're thinking he's going to do?
I don't know. I don't think we could say, could be the next Trey Lance for all we know.
That's what you want. Has there ever
I
been a
don't
quarterback taken top 10 who doesn't start for multiple years? Like in the last 20 years? Like, has that happened?
besides I mean Trey Lance.
Sure. Well, he's supposed to, and then he got hurt. Like they did
Yeah,
start him,
right. Well,
and
that's
then
why I
he.
like the pick.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Just unprecedented. It's
Yeah.
yeah. He was a hard one to rank.
Yeah. No, he definitely was. Well, appreciate it. This will be up tonight. And hopefully you don't
Beautiful.
have to come back on after the next one after getting roasted again.
I mean,
So
it's part of the deal, but happy to be in this league. Appreciate you guys welcoming me in,
oh,
and
definitely for sure. It's been a pleasure.
glad I could have provided the first big bang of the offseason with the Mahomes trade.
Yeah,
I've
but
got to,
first big that was the biggest trade in the history of the league, no doubt about it.
yeah, it was a sweaty one. I kept messaging Will. You sure this is okay? Are you
Yeah.
sure you're okay with this? Because this is not a small move, Will.
Yeah.
And
Hey, Travers contributing there, giving
he
you
kept
the
saying,
green light.
Do it, fuck Mahomes." So
Nice.
he's like, "I don't want to
Nice.
root for him anyway." I was like, "Perfect.
Love it. Love it.
That's great reasoning. Let's do it."
Incredible. Well, good luck this season. We're in the division. We'll have two matchups,
Perfect.
and
You as well. I am
I'm
favored in a
sure.
couple games early on.
Yeah, yeah. Week one against John Canellis.
Yeah, I think
So,
then I think I played like Tam and Mark in the first like and John in like the first 4 weeks, and I think I'm
oh,
favored
that's
in
a
all of
nice
those. So
schedule. Nice schedule.
I could start out hot, and boy, I will be chirping.
Yeah, I have no doubt about that one. I definitely do not doubt that.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thanks again, buddy.
Appreciate it.
And from all of us at the Board Podcast to our listeners, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Out.